Okay, so today hopefully we'll start to get back on track. I will not discuss anything in class about how to sign into Khan Academy or the only thing I'll basically say about the syllabus is that I'm up to date. So if you look at the grade book and you have 100, then you're all set with that. If you still see a 0, that's because, or a blank, that's because that you still haven't completed it and you have the end of the week to complete it. Any issues with that should be dealt with before school, after school, yes. Did you give a mom email? Come and see me after school and I'll check. I know I put a few extra ones in this morning, but come see me after school before school, yes. Are you leaving your after school? Yeah, today I'll be here. Unless I have a meeting or for some reason I have to get out of here quick, which hasn't been the case yet, I'll be here after school. My posted office hours are before school, that's when I have to be here. But I've been here, there hasn't been one day so far that I haven't been after school. Jamal, you got a question? Just want to remember. Okay. So what I would like to do first each day is come and check if anybody's posted anything. I gave you 2 extra days to work on the Khan Academy. So maybe you're stuck on something. And so since I gave you some extra time for week 1, we would go to week 1 assignment. Sorry, not week 1 assignment. Period 4 homework help. Week 1, period 4 homework help. And I can see that there's no replies. If you a lot of you, well, I'm not gonna say a lot, but some of you might have finished the week 1 that's already due tonight. You should already be started on week 2. So if you have any questions on that, I'll go over those as well. So we check week 2, period 4, and nothing's posted there either. If you don't know how to take a screenshot with your device, that would be another thing to come see me before school or after school. I'll be more than happy to help you with whatever device you have. But if you guys don't post, then the only person controlling any type of review or anything like that is me. If you want it to be catered more to you, this is my method. If your device, when you take a screenshot, saves a file, then you would hit, once you open up the thread, reply to the thread, and you would click on insert stuff and insert the file. If your device, when you take a screenshot, copies it to the clipboard like a copy and paste, then you would copy and paste. Can't make it simpler than that. So, see, yesterday was supposed to be the day for rotations, but we fall behind. So today we're going to jump right into rotations. I doubt we're going to finish reflections, which is what we should be doing today, but hopefully we can at least get enough of a start on reflections so that tomorrow we finish reflections, get to dilations, and we'll have 1 review day before your first quiz, which is on Friday. Friday's the first quiz. Any questions on anything I just said? All right. So Ms. Slam made a comment yesterday that she said that, she finds rotations to be the most challenging. I would probably tend to agree with her. It requires some memorization. It's easy to get confused. It also sometimes involves adding and subtracting where you have to do even though you don't know you're doing it, you're doing translations and then a flip and then translating back. It probably has the most steps of any of the transformations. So I remember that I showed you this slide yesterday, but what I wanted you to focus on, the most important thing on this table is, or on this slide, is this table down here.
No, those rules.
Because these are the rules for rotations. And the thing is, you have to memorize them. So let's try to go over them a little bit more in depth before we get into the examples. All of these rotations are assuming 2 things. Every rotation has a center of rotation. So these assume that your center of rotation is the origin. Where is the origin located on a coordinate plane? At 0, 0, yep. And they're also assuming that you're going counterclockwise. I did see one on the examples that it went clockwise. So, but if nothing else is stated, we assume counterclockwise. If for some reason you are told to go clockwise, the only ones that make a difference between clockwise or counterclockwise are the ones that say counterclockwise. So if I went clockwise instead of counterclockwise, these two would swap. A 90-degree counterclockwise rotation is the same thing as a 270 degrees clockwise. A 270-degree counterclockwise is the same as a 90-degree clockwise. So if that word changes, you just flip-flop the two rules. If I'm watching a basketball game and LeBron James comes and does a 360 dunk, okay, when the ball goes through the rim, where is he facing? He's facing the rim. Why? Because his body underwent a complete turn. So let's start off there with an easy one. What happens on a 360-degree rotation? Nothing. Every single point that started off as an X and a Y stays as the X and a Y. Stays the same. Nothing happens. When he jumped off the ground, he was facing, if he did a 360. When he jumps off the ground, he was facing the rim. When he dunks the ball, he's facing the rim. His body relative to the hoop stayed the same, even though he spun around. He did a full rotation. Then let's go to probably the second easiest, which is a 180. If now he were to dunk 180, where is he facing when he dunks the basketball? When he jumped, he was facing the hoop, but then when he dunked, it wasn't behind the hoop.
His head was facing the other basket.
He was facing away. He turned away. What is 180 degree? It's a half turn. Okay. So what happens on a half turn? Well, any point that you start with X, Y changes sign. If you're being an active listener and not only just writing down what you see, I would hope you're at least writing down what you see, but if you're also writing down what you hear, you might want to write in there, changes sign. If the X and the Y stay where they are, they just change sign. If I have an X that's a 5, it becomes a negative 5. If I have a Y that's a negative 2, it becomes a positive 2. It just changes sign. Okay, so now let's compare and contrast the two that might be the most difficult to memorize, which are the 90-degree and the 270-degree terms. What do they have in common? What do they both have in common? If we look at where we're going to end up. Okay, but what I'm referring to is the actual rule, the rule for the transformation, where they start off compared to how they end up. What do they both have in common? Okay, I mean, you could say that there's an, but I would worry about that later. That's the first thing I would focus on. Because if I have a 90 or a 270, the X and Y are going to flip flop. That's the first thing I'm going to remember to do. I'm going to remember to change the X and the Y. Just Y becomes X, X becomes Y. Flip them. Okay? Then, if you understood from what I said on a 180 that when you stick a negative in front of something, that means it's changing sign. Well, yeah, somebody mentioned you see a negative here. But where's the negative located? It's in front of the Y, but the Y became the X. So once you flip the X and the Y, what sign are you going to change? Change the X. With the first coordinate changes sign on a 90 degree. On a 270 degree, change the X and the Y. Okay, flip them. But then, which one is going to change sign? The second coordinate, the Y, because that's where the X moves. And look, she said it for a reason. Yeah, it requires memorization. It's probably you're going to find it to be the most challenging, but if you study and study and study and study, eventually, hopefully you can memorize.
But the good thing is there's a rule. I mean, there is a rule that you can go by. I don't know about y'all, but I can't take a shape and just in my head figure out where the rotation is.
And then, yeah, and then where it gets even more challenging is now when your center of rotation, these are the ones you're going to find that are the hardest. Now,
And I think,
I'm trying to be careful with my words because I don't want to reveal too much because I want them to study everything. But let's just leave it at the most important thing for you to know, okay? Priority wise is make sure you know how to rotate around the origin. Okay, let's make sure of that. But that doesn't mean not to learn how to rotate around other points. I'll leave it vague there. All right. Let's go ahead and do this one. Graph quadrilateral RSTU with those vertices, and then we're going to rotate 270 about the origin. When you rotate, you need a direction. Macintosh, what was your first name? Brian. Brian? Paying attention? Why don't you do this? Look, we got this seat over here. Got your name all over it. Come and sit closer. This doesn't say a direction. This is not telling me what direction to rotate in, so what do we assume? Counterclockwise. If you're not told, assume counterclockwise. So on that table that you're going to memorize, it was the third entry down. All right, so let's first here. Let's name the points then. What are the rules? I don't know. Should we graph first, or should yeah? Let's graph first. Let's just graph RSTU first. Let's do that. So R is at 3-1. We'll put an R. Let's do this in red. S is at 5-1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1. Oh, it's gonna be hard to see. There's S. T is at 5, -3. And then U is at 2, -1. And if we, it's U. So we connect the dots. That's what that looks like. That's RSTU.
so 270 counterclockwise is the same thing as what? 90
Clockwise.
Good, very good.
Yeah. Now I wouldn't memorize both. Just memorize one. Like if I would tell you, just memorize the ones you saw there that were clockwise, counterclockwise. But then if you're asked clockwise, then adjust and go back to counterclockwise. I think if you try to do like you're gonna try to memorize too much. So let's do R first. Let's do R prime. What's the first thing I told you to remember about the 90 and the 270?
It changes.
Switch the X and the Y. So if this was 3 and 1, we're gonna make it 1 and 3. But then besides that, one of them had to change sign. Not both of them, one of them.
-1 and 3. Right?
Look at the rules.
It's gonna be the 3 that changes sign. Wait, does that mean that it always becomes negative? No, if it would have started negative, then you make it positive. But when we get to the negative ones, if it needs to change, that's gonna become positive.
Right.
Okay. For the next one, we're gonna remember, we're gonna change it to 1, 5. What's gonna change sign? The 5. Then we have, I'm just gonna write 3 and 5 for right now. Okay. It isn't that the 3 is changing sign because the 3 is gonna stay negative. So I'll go ahead and write the negative because that's staying negative. It started negative, it stays negative. But now what is the 5 gonna become?
Negative.
Yeah. And then here we have the 1 stays negative and the 2 becomes. So we end up with negative everything. I'm sorry, except for the 1s. There's those first ones that we started with stay positive. So to help out with the visuals, I'm gonna now graph this in blue so you can compare the two, and you're gonna see it's gonna look like it turned 270 degrees, which is a 3/4 turn. If we started here and went 3/4, I would assume that most of the points should end up in the third quadrant. Everybody here took algebra 1. Oh, that reminds me, I need to discuss this with you. Since we all have different guided studies, I'm gonna wait till tomorrow And tomorrow, today during guided study, you're gonna get one of these. Bring it tomorrow. Bring it tomorrow. Bring it tomorrow. Bring it tomorrow. Okay? Because I need to collect them from you real quick and check everybody's the placement. Since today, well, I guess today everybody here has guided study after this class. I wouldn't even be able to see you, but since tomorrow I will see you. Please bring these.
Transcript.
It's a transcript that has all your credits.
You just have to make sure you are
In the right.
supposed to be.
Yeah. All right. So one. Let's go. Get this out of here. 1, -3, 1, and then down 3. 1, -5. -3, -5, and -1, -2. And then dots. This was R prime. Then we have S prime, T prime, and U prime. If it would have gone a quarter more turn, if it would have, I mean, maybe it's hard for you to visualize such a big turn of 270, but think of it this way. If I would have kept on going a quarter more turn, what would end up happening? I go back to where I started, yeah. I go back to where I started. Notice you see how it's lining up? And R would go back where R was, S would go back where S is, T would go back where T is. Okay. Any questions there? Sarah, question? I'm gonna skip this slide. I put it on the, actually I think I got these notes from the department, but I was looking at it before, and I just think this one slide is gonna take up the rest of the period. It's kind of small. Everything that's on here we can get to in the coming examples. There's some that are like it. So maybe we can do C real quick, because that takes 2 seconds. What are the number of degrees separating the fan blades? Well, how many fan blades are there?
4.
4. How many degrees are there in a circle? 360. What's 360 divided by 4? See, like B wants you to do all the different rotations for the triangle, but then that's gonna get really cluttered. And we have examples coming up that have 90, 180, all that stuff. This one has a 90-degree rotation. It's just kind of a small graph. So I'd rather just go on to the next examples. And these are more fun because now we have different center of rotations on some of these. But this is a great example to start because this is a guided example. It tells you what to do in all the steps. Really, of all these, the one that we've done already is step 2. So what makes this new is step 1 and step 3. What are we doing in step 1 and step 3? Where's the verb? What are you doing? Adding and subtracting. What did we learn last class, or the last 2 classes? You're doing when you're adding and subtracting. What type of transformation? Even though you don't realize it, what type of transformation are you doing? Say it again? Not a dilation, we haven't covered the translations, yeah. Yeah, you're sliding it so that you can turn it and then you're sliding it back. That's the main difference. Even though you're not actually sliding anything, you don't realize it, but that's what you're doing by adding and subtracting. Alright, so they want us to graph first A, B, and C. Let's just keep the color thing going and let's go with red first. A is at 3, 1. It's going to be a triangle, so it's not as many points. B is at 5, 1. Put these things close together. And then C is at 5, 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So here's a triangle. But our center of rotation is now going to be 3, -4. What does step 1 say to do? subtract. Okay, we're going to subtract. You gotta be careful because if it's negative, what happens when you subtract a negative? You add. You add. So let's go point by point. Let's do let's start off with A prime and let's do all of these steps with just A prime. Let's do blue. If this is confusing to you, you can go back and watch it tonight. A prime. So we need a starting point. What's the at what x was A starting at? At what x is A starting at? Over there in red, where is A located?
3-1.
At 3, 1. What's the x? Is 3. What am I going to do to that 3? I'm going to subtract the center of rotation. And just to show you here, maybe I can do this like in green. Maybe the visual would help. My center of rotation is 3, -4. So I'm going to be rotating around this point. The circle is going to be going not around the center. It's going to be going around this point here in green. So what am I going to subtract from 3? If I'm subtracting the center of rotation, what is the x of the center of rotation? Also 3. So I'm going to go 3 minus 3. Comma. What's the y that I'm starting at? The y that I'm starting at for A is 1. But then I'm going to subtract -4. Subtract negative. Subtract negative. Double negative gives you a positive. 3 minus 3 is 0. 1 plus 4 is 5. Now, step 2 is the same thing. Step 2 is what we did last time. Okay? They want a 90-degree rotation. They do not tell us, they don't tell us the direction, so we assume counterclockwise. Now, here they were nice enough to give you the rule, because I guess this was guided. But it's the same thing. If you want to take a second, compare. It's the same thing we saw before. What are we going to do first? Watch. Let's help you. This is step. Oh. If I don't write it on the board, they don't write it, even though I'm telling you. So this was step 1 here. Okay, where we added them. Then somebody was correct. They did say to flip. And then not only am I going to flip, on a 90-degree though, which one changes sign? The x, the 5. So this is going to become negative. If it would have been the 0, let's pretend this would have been a 270 and the 0 has to change sign. What's -0? Still 0. It still would have stayed the same. But this becomes -5, 0. So I have now completed step 2. Okay. Now what do they want us to do in step 3? We want to do what? Add. Okay, so now we're not going to change any signs. We're going to get where we left off, and we're going to add it back. What x did we leave off at? We left off at -5. What am I going to add to -5? I'm going to add the center of rotation. Yeah, Jamal. 3, good. Plus 3. Comma. Where's the y that I left off at? 0. Add back the center of rotation. Well, if you add a negative, it's negative.
So what are you really doing? You're adding a negative.
If you add a negative, subtract, -4. So A prime, when all is said and done, is going to be at -2, -4. That was step 3. Step 3 is done. My OCD is kicking in, so step 1 should have. We're going in order and saying when things are. Let's say this is step 1 here.
Questions on that? So
Any questions so far on A?
gotta ask.
Okay, so and now let's go ahead and plot A prime just to finish it off. We'll finish off at -2, -4. So here would be a. This is a 90-degree rotation around this point over here. Okay, let's do the other points. We'll do these a little bit more quickly, hopefully. Let's do B prime. At what x did B start at? 5. First thing I want to do is subtract the center of rotation. So it's going to be 5? Yeah, -3. Jaden, how you doing, man? Good day today? Jaden, what y did I start at for B? Point B, what was the starting point for? What was the starting coordinate for 1? For 1, yeah. And then what am I going to subtract from that? Subtract the center of rotation. What was the y of the center of rotation? -4 minus -4 is the same +4. If you look, if you've already done 1 point, every step is going to be the same. You're going to do the same thing. Just you're starting at different numbers. So B prime is 2, 5 for right now. At the end of step 1, where we left off at, we did a translation to 2, 5. Okay. Then step 2 says to follow the rule for the origin. So we're gonna flip and say 5, 2. Which one changes sign? For a 90-degree, it's the 5. It's the one, the x. And then now we're going to add back the center of rotation, which is going to look the same. So B prime would be at -5 plus 3 and 2 minus 4. So B prime ends up at -2 and -2.
So it's not difficult, right? It's just a lot of steps, but it's, but you can do it.
It looks like C is going to end up somewhere around here. So just to make it fit, let's do C prime here. Let's write it later. Luna, where is what's the x for point C? What are we starting at? Where? The first C that you see up there. What's the x? 5. Let's concentrate. Okay. What are we going to do? We're going to subtract the center of rotation. The center of rotation is 3, -4, so we're going to go -3, comma, Luna. At what y is point C starting at? Go look for C. There's point C. You can see it here. You can see it here. What's the y of that point? It is 6. So we start at 6. And then we'll go minus -4, which is +4. So C prime would be at 2, 10. But then we got to do step 2, which is to follow the rules that we're going to have to memorize. We do the flippity flip. Jamal, which one's going to change sign? Harley, which one's going to change sign? The x or the y by process of elimination? The 10. The 10 changes sign. And then we're going to add it back. So we're going to go -10 plus 3 and 2 minus 4. So we get -7, -2. -7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, -2. Here's C prime if I connect the dots. So there's your new triangle. It did a 90-degree turn around that green point. If it would have done a 180 turn, you would have seen it facing down. C would have been facing down. If it would have been 270, it would have kept on going around. C would have been facing over towards the right. If it does a full 360, it goes back to where it started. Joseph Dennis, any questions?
Will we ever have problems with the 360-degree turn?
You might. I know you want it to be 360 because then you don't have to do anything.
Stefan's got
Oh, sorry about that. I see it. What?
When you, for example, for this problem, if let's say you find A and B, can't you just take the y of C on the first and just put it on the after?
As long as no dilation has occurred, okay, then yes, because a rotation is a rigid motion, shape does not change. Okay, you could say, okay, yes, relative to A and B, the C was lined up with the B, and it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 above, and count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and do it that way. But what I would caution you against it is, especially if you don't have like a good spatial awareness, I guess you would say, if you might mess up and count in the wrong direction. Maybe instead of putting the C over here where it's supposed to go, you count this way and put it over here. I'd be careful with that. I'd rather just let the numbers take care of everything and then I just plot it afterwards. Even as a teacher, I feel kind of iffy about trying to do it too much visual. Okay. No other questions there? Okay. All right, what's different here? Yeah, for the first time we see clockwise, but luckily, Mr. Romero took care of you guys and told you, okay, instead of having to memorize a bunch of things, yeah, our eyes are going to see clockwise, but our brains are going to see counterclockwise. But what's a 90 clockwise the same as?
270.
As 270 counterclockwise. And that's actually the same as the first one that we did. It's going to be the exact same thing. What else is a little bit different here? The center of rotation. On the first one where we did a 270, the center of rotation was the origin. Here we're going to rotate around this, but that's fine. We just did one like that. It won't get harder. There's a good thing, it won't get harder than this. This is the hardest it's going to get. Because you have to remember the difference between clockwise and counterclockwise, and you have a different center of rotation. If you can do this one on your own, you can do all of them. Okay, let's follow the steps. Instead of graphing the original one, just to save time, I'm just going to graph the image. I'm not going to graph the pre-image, I'm going to graph the image, but we are going to do the transformations. We'll just do it in blue for continuity purposes. So let's go Q prime. Luna, what is the x of that first cube? 4. What was the first thing that we were told to do on that last one? Do, verb. What's the first thing we learned how to do? Subtract. So it's subtract, then do what we know how to do with the table, thing you memorized, and then add it back. Subtract first, then add. So what are we gonna you said start off at 4, I agree. What are we gonna subtract? Here's the point of rotation. We're gonna subtract -2. Subtracting a negative is the same as adding, so +2. Comma. What's the y of the original cube, of the pre-image? What's the y of the, that's the x. What's the y? 3. Subtract minus that point over there, which is 4. So Q prime is going to be, for now, 6, -1. Okay. Then now we're going to apply the table, which on a 270 counterclockwise. Ryan, what did that say to do? What are we going to do first?
On X.
What are we going to do first? Trying to memorize it so we don't have to rely on the notes. Use your words, Jamal. Yeah, let's flip the coordinates. But then besides that, one of them has to change sign. Which is the one that's changing sign? On a 270?
Why?
The 6, yeah, the y. So the negative 1 stays negative. Then the last step is we're going to add back the center of rotation. So we left off at a negative 1. If we add that back, adding a negative 2 is the same as subtracting, comma. We left off for the y at a negative 6 and add a positive. So q prime is going to be at negative 3, negative 2. Yes, sir.
So, let's say when we're flipping it, the y's are negative, right? Do we just make it positive?
Yes.
The opposite.
Change the sign, yeah. You know what, this is going to get really cluttered, so I'm going to color code these. I'm going to do everyone a different color. Let's do R in red. Skylar, what's the original x for point R? Where are we starting off with on the x's? 8, yeah. And what are we going to do to the 8? The same thing we did to the q, which was plus 2 first. What's the original y for the R? And we're going to do the same thing we did to the q, which was minus 4. So R prime is going to temporarily be at 10, negative 2. We're going to translate it to 10, negative 2. Then Ryan, here's a chance to redeem yourself. Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, you flip them. Negative 2, comma 10. We'll try Ryan again. After we flip them on a 270-degree turn, which one's changing sign? No. Alvin, do you know? So which one? That's a guess, but no. Incorrect. On a 270, yeah, it's going to be the 10. Jamal, if it would have been the negative 2, then yeah, it would have made it positive. Then, finally, we're going to go and now add back that center of rotation like we did before. Adding a negative is the same as subtracting, so negative 2 minus 2, because I'm adding this negative 2. And then negative 10 plus 4. So when all is said and done, R ends up being at negative 4, comma, negative 6. While you guys are writing that, I'm going to go ahead and start plotting it. Let's plot it in black. So negative 3, negative 2.
Hey guys, if you want to think of it like acronyms, like if you have things to help you remember things, you did subtract, you did the rule, then you did add, right? So SRA, if you can remember like SRA,
Yeah, sure.
you know, that's something you want to subtract, do the rule, it's the appropriate rule that needs you to do, and then add it back. So if you're going to jot down just SRA, maybe that'll help you remember steps.
I know I didn't graph the pre-image, but something you could do that would, because I am going to graph the image, I'm graphing the after, not the before, is if this is all over the place, and it seems like the things are not making a like quadrilateral, like, you know, Q is here, R is here, but then like S is over here, T is down there, then it's probably because there's something wrong adding and subtracting, maybe flipping. Let's see, so let's go green now. Let's do S. S prime then. The first S is 8. Go a little faster now because we've done this before. The first thing we're going to do is take away a negative 2, which is the same as adding 2. And then start off, y is at negative 4, and then take away 4. So S prime is going to be for now at 10, negative 8. Ryan, what do I do next?
You flip it.
Okay, there we go. Let's flip them. And then it just happens to be a coincidence that it ended up being positive again, Jamal, but the one that changes sign is the 10. So then now we get this negative 8, and we're going to add back a negative 2, which is minus 2. We get a negative 10. We're going to add back a 4. So S prime ended up being at negative 10, negative 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I'm assuming if I did everything right, T should be somewhere around here. It could technically be all the way up here, but it should not end up being on the right side of the page if they're gonna go in order. Q, R, S, T. Have I lost anybody yet? Okay, so then we'll finish off in purple. T prime. We start off for the T at 6. Then I'm going to take away a -2, which means add 2. I start off at -2, which then I'm going to go ahead and take away 4. This puts me at 8, -6. Ryan? Good. Fire today. So -6, and then the 8 is what changes sign. Then we're gonna add back the -2, so -6 minus 2. We're gonna add back a 4. So we end up with -8, -4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3. So I was right. It ended up being where I wanted it to be. And there's my quadrilateral.
So just a reminder, when do you do all of these steps? Like when do you have to do this? When you are what? When you're rotating around the origin? You have to do all this when you rotate around the origin? Yes or no?
No, when the center of
No.
rotation is not the origin. Instead of, look, we only have a few minutes left. Instead of moving on to reflections, let's get to one. Let's go back to our happy place. And let's just do a rotation around the, like this is around the point. Let's do, here we go, an origin one. Let's go 90 degrees about the origin. So if we list the points, T starts off at -1, 5. So T prime, if it's 90 or 270, any of those two, we're gonna flip, Jamal. And then which one changes sign on the 90? The 5 becomes negative. And that's all I gotta do. I don't have to do any of the extra adding and subtracting stuff. Okay? For C, C is at -3, 4. So C prime, I just do the flip. Which one changes sign? 4. When it's, because if it doesn't say anything, we assume counterclockwise. A is at -2, 3. So all we gotta do for A prime is flip it and then change the sign of the 3. Memorization. And then finally, if G starts off at 2, 1, that means that G prime would be at -1, 2. This is at 16. I'll stay away from the plotting, because that's more of an algebra skill. Does anybody here not know how to plot points? See if I can do one more. This is about point 270. Okay, here's perfect. We'll end on this one, 180, around the origin. What was the rule for 180? They don't both become negative, but what does a negative mean? What did I tell you to do? Write in, even though you don't see it. I said it and I said write it in. Change the sign. That's all you gotta do is change signs. Change signs. So on a 180 around the origin, look, F. F is starting off at 1, 0. So what's F prime gonna be? Well, the 1 becomes negative. Can a 0 become negative? No, so it stays. I'm gonna just leave it in red to get finishes. S starts off at 2, 0. So after, what's S prime gonna be? Negative 2, 0 on a 180. I is at 1, negative 2. So what is I prime gonna be? Negative 1. Positive 2, good. And then finally M is at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, negative 3. So on a 180, what is that going to become? Negative 5, positive 3. Tomorrow, then we'll, right? Did I do something wrong? Okay. Tomorrow we'll shift to reflections. Reflections, I think, is shorter, so maybe we can start dilations, and then that'll leave Thursday for finishing dilations and trying to review for the quiz on Friday.